The quarterly reports weren't going to file themselves, but my hands had stopped moving 10 minutes ago. I was staring at the screen without seeing it, listening to my phone buzz against the desk for the third time in 20 minutes. All from the same number. All from Dylan. "Where did you park today?" The first message had read. Then, 3 minutes later, I drove past the building. "Your car isn't in the lot you told me about." And then, 2 minutes after that, "Elliot's secretary smiled at you in the elevator this morning." I was watching from the lobby. I set my phone face down on the desk and pressed my palms flat against the cool surface until my heartbeat slowed. Watching from the lobby. He'd driven 20 minutes downtown during his lunch break to stand in the lobby of my office building and watch who smiled at me in an elevator. 2 years ago, when we first started dating, I'd thought his attentiveness was romantic. He remembered everything, how I took my coffee, what I'd mentioned wanting to see at the museum, the name of my third-grade teacher I'd brought up exactly once. I'd told my sister Becca he paid attention in a way no one ever had. Becca had said, "That's not attention, that's surveillance." I'd told her she was being dramatic. I wasn't thinking about that right now. I was thinking about the pile of invoices in front of me, and the meeting in 20 minutes, and the fact that I needed to get through today without falling apart. "Tatum?" I looked up. Knox Calloway was standing in the doorway of his office across the hall, which meant he'd been watching me sit motionless at my desk for God knows how long. He was still in his jacket, which meant he'd just come up from the parking garage. Silver threads in dark hair. A face that had never once given me any indication of what he was thinking until the exact moment he wanted it to. I'd worked as operations coordinator for Calloway Capital for 3 years. Knox had founded the firm 11 years ago from nothing, and now it managed 9 figures in private equity across 4 sectors. He was the kind of person other people in our industry talked about in careful, respectful tones. I'd also watched him calmly dismantle a vendor contract that had been misrepresenting their numbers for 6 months, and his voice had stayed completely level the entire time. That had told me more about him than anything else. "Everything all right?" he asked. "Fine," I said, which was the word I always said first. "Just working through the Harmon account reconciliation." He didn't say anything for a moment, just looked at me with that quiet, steady attention that always made me feel slightly transparent. "The Harmon reconciliation was finished yesterday," he said. "I saw it in the shared drive." I had nothing to say to that. Tatum. He said my name differently than other people did. Not softer exactly, but more deliberate, like it mattered to get it right. "If something's wrong, you can say so." "Nothing's wrong," I said. "I'm sorry. I'll have the quarterly summary to you before the 2 o'clock. He held my gaze for another second, then nodded once and turned back into his office. But I noticed he left the door open. Dylan was standing at my car when I came down to the parking garage at 6:30. I saw him before he saw me, leaning against the passenger door of my Civic with his arms crossed, scrolling through his phone. He looked completely normal. That was the thing that got me every time. He looked like a person you'd want to know. Dark jacket, easy posture. He'd been doing improv comedy when we met, which meant he was good at making a room laugh, good at reading people, good at saying the right thing at the right moment. He looked up and smiled when he heard my footsteps. "Hey you, I figured I'd surprise you. How long have you been here?" I asked. He shrugged. "Couple hours. 2 hours in a parking garage waiting to surprise me." I thought about Becca's voice again. "Dylan, we talked about this. You can't just—" "I wasn't doing anything," he said, the smile thinning. "I wanted to see you." "Is that a crime?" "No, but because I feel like every time I try to do something nice, you find a way to make it weird." He pushed off the car and came toward me, and the parking garage was empty, and the overhead lights were that particular shade of fluorescent that makes everything feel slightly unreal. All I'm saying is I drove across town to see my girlfriend after work. That's what people who care about each other do. I thought about the text messages, about the lobby. "I know," I said, because it was easier. That was 3 weeks ago. The night everything changed, I was at my desk at 7:15, because the Harmon account actually did need attention. There was a discrepancy I'd found in a subledger that had been making me uneasy for days. The office was empty except for me, and I'd assumed whoever was working late in the building. Knox's office had been dark when I walked past it. My phone buzzed. "Dylan, you said you were leaving at 6. There's something I need to finish, I typed back. I know. Who's still there with you? I stared at the last message for a long time, no question mark, not a question at all. No one, I wrote, just me. 3 dots. Then, you're lying. Then, I'm coming up there. I stood up so fast my chair rolled back and hit the credenza. Dylan had been to my office twice before, both times for lunch early in our relationship when things were still easy and new. He knew which floor I was on. He knew the building had an after-hours access button at the front entrance. I walked out to the hallway without any plan, just needing to move, needing to think, and nearly collided with Knox. He was in his coat, bag over his shoulder, keys already in his hand. He must have come back from wherever he'd been without me noticing. He grabbed my shoulder to steady me when I stumbled, and then looked at my face and his hand stayed. What happened? He said. I stopped, started over. Dylan is coming here. My boyfriend. The word felt wrong in my mouth. We've been having some problems and he doesn't. He says I'm lying about being alone, and he's on his way up and I don't. I stopped talking because I didn't know how to finish the sentence. I don't know what he'll do. I don't know if that's a rational fear or not. I don't know when I started being afraid of him. Knox's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes did. Come on, he said. Knox, we're leaving. He said it the same way he'd said my name, like it was decided and sensible and there was no reason to argue. He kept his hand on my shoulder, and we moved toward the elevator, and I went, because somewhere in the back of my mind, a very quiet part of me had been waiting for someone to say those 2 words for a long time. We passed Dylan in the lobby. He was at the front desk, talking to the night security guard, pointing up and showing something on his phone. He saw me with Knox, and his face went through about 7 different expressions in the span of a second. I could see him calculating, the hand on my shoulder, the fact that I was leaving with someone, all the things he'd been accusing me of in texts for the last 4 months. Knox steered me through the revolving door without slowing down. Get in the car, he said quietly once we were outside. My car, right there. He pointed to a black Volvo at the curb. I'll handle this. You don't have to. Get in the car, Tatum. I got in the car. I don't know what Knox said to Dylan. I sat in the passenger seat watching them through the glass doors. Dylan gesturing, Knox standing absolutely still, speaking in that level voice he used when he had already won an argument, and was simply waiting for the other person to realize it. After about 2 minutes, Dylan walked out. He looked at the Volvo, looked at me through the windshield, then he turned and walked toward the parking structure. Knox came out 30 seconds later and got in the driver's side. What did you say? I asked. That you'd left for the evening and I'd walked you out as a courtesy. He started the car, and that the building has a visitor log and security footage, and that showing up uninvited to someone's workplace at 7:30 on a Wednesday qualifies as harassment in the state of Illinois. I let out a breath I had been holding since my phone buzzed at 7:18. He's going to be furious, I said. Probably. Knox checked the mirror and pulled into traffic. Where do you live? Knox, you don't have to. I'm not leaving you on a street corner. Where do you live? I told him. He drove. The city moved past the windows in streams of light, and I sat there in the passenger seat of my boss's car and tried to figure out how I had arrived at this particular moment in my life. How long has it been like this? He asked, after we'd been quiet for a few minutes. I looked out the window. A while. Since the beginning? No, maybe 6 months in, maybe earlier, and I wasn't paying attention. He didn't say anything to that. He just drove, and the silence wasn't uncomfortable the way silences usually are when you're afraid someone is judging you. It was just quiet. I know what you're thinking, I said eventually. What am I thinking? That I should have left. That it's obvious. That it's the kind of thing you see from the outside and wonder why anyone stays. Knox was quiet for a moment. I wasn't thinking that, he said. Then what were you thinking? Another pause. That controlling behavior is designed to feel like love. That's what makes it so hard to see. I didn't respond to that. There wasn't anything to say. He was right, and it landed somewhere uncomfortable and necessary, the way true things sometimes do. He pulled up in front of my building. The lights were on in the lobby. I didn't move to get out yet. Can I ask you something? I said. Yes. Why did you come back to the office tonight? Your light was off when I forgot something. He said simply, without making it into anything. And you looked like you'd been somewhere else all day. I was going to check in before I left again. He looked at me then, fully, the first time he'd looked directly at me since we got in the car. I'm glad I did. I got out of the car. I turned back before I closed the door and looked at him in the dim glow of the interior light. Thank you, I said, for all of it. Go inside, he said. Lock the door. If he comes here tonight, call me. He had never given me his personal number. He reached over, picked up my phone from where I'd set it on the seat, typed in his contact information, and handed it back. Good night, Tatum, he said. I went inside. I locked the door. I sat on my kitchen floor with my back against the cabinet and let myself shake for a little while, because I hadn't let myself do that yet, and my body had apparently saved it up. Dylan called 14 times that night. I let them all go to voicemail. I blocked his number at 1 a.m. At 1:15, he texted from a different number. We need to talk. At 1:40, another number. I saw how he touched you. At 2:10, I know you're not asleep. I read them in the dark. Then I put the phone face down on my nightstand and stared at the ceiling, and tried to remember the last time I'd felt like my apartment belonged to me. The next morning, Knox had coffee on my desk when I came in. He didn't say anything about the night before. He didn't make it into a thing. He just glanced up from his laptop when I sat down and said, "Good morning," and went back to reading. I don't know why that made my eyes sting. I think because it was so ordinary, so unremarkable, like bringing someone coffee was just something you did for people. At 10 o'clock, he appeared in my doorway and asked if I had a few minutes. I followed him into his office and he closed the door, which he never did. Sit down, he said. I sat. I want to ask you about something and you don't have to answer if you don't want to. He sat on the edge of his desk rather than behind it, which changed the geometry of the room. Is there anything I need to be aware of? With Dylan. In terms of what happened last night and whether it's likely to happen again. I thought about the texts, the parking garage, the lobby. He has my home address, I said. He has my schedule. He has a key to my apartment. I paused. He knows where I work. Knox was quiet for a moment. Do you feel safe? The question hit me somewhere I wasn't expecting. Partly because no one had asked it before. Partly because I realized I didn't know the answer. I don't know, I said honestly. I think so. But I don't know what he'll do now that. I stopped. I ended things. Last night, after I got home. I texted him. I told him it was over. I looked at my hands. He didn't take it well. Knox looked at me for a long time. Okay, he said. Here's what we're going to do. The we of that sentence did something to me I'm still not entirely sure how to describe. The security badge policy changed that week. The building manager was sent a formal request from Callaway Capital's legal counsel, noting that an individual had attempted unauthorized after-hours access to the office, and requesting heightened visitor log protocols. The parking garage attendant was notified with a physical description and a license plate number. Knox mentioned none of this to me directly. I only knew because I saw the correspondence on the shared server when I was filing documents. He had handled all of it quietly and completely, and without asking me to do anything except exist. Dylan didn't come back to the building. He did, however, show up at the coffee shop 3 blocks away where I got breakfast on Tuesdays, and at the dry cleaner where I'd been going for 2 years. Each time he happened to be there. Each time he was perfectly friendly, perfectly reasonable, smiling like nothing had happened, asking how I was, mentioning that he missed me, saying he just wanted to talk, just 5 minutes, just a chance to explain. I kept my voice even and my exits quick. I documented every encounter in the Notes app on my phone with timestamps, because Knox's attorney had suggested I do exactly that during the consultation Knox had also quietly arranged. Working across the hall from him every day was complicated, not the way I'd expected it to be, which I thought would be awkward and careful and stiff. It was actually the opposite. Knox treated me exactly as he always had, with respect and directness, and that particular brand of attentiveness that meant he listened when I spoke and remembered what I said. What had changed was just that I was now aware of it in a way I hadn't let myself be before. I'd been aware of Knox Callaway since my first week at the firm. That was unavoidable, but I'd put him in a category in my mind and kept him there. He was my employer. He was 11 years older than me. He was careful, measured, intensely private, and I'd been with Dylan, who had initially seemed like the safe choice, the fun choice, the uncomplicated choice. And I'd never let myself look at Knox as anything other than exactly what he was on paper. Except now I sat across from him at Tuesday morning briefings and noticed the way he pushed back when he disagreed with something, clear and direct, no performance to it. The way he was the same person in every room, whether he was talking to a junior analyst or negotiating a term sheet. The way he'd handed me his personal phone number in the dark without making it into something it wasn't yet. I wasn't going to do anything about it. I wasn't in a place to do anything about it. But I noticed. 6 weeks after Dylan and I ended things, I got a notification from my bank. I almost missed it. I was on my lunch break, eating at my desk, and it came through as a small alert on my phone. Unusual activity detected on your account. Please review. I clicked through without thinking much about it. 4 transactions I didn't recognize, 3 from the same online retailer I'd never shopped at. 1 cash advance from an ATM 2 states away, the same evening I'd been at my sister Becca's house for dinner. I went very still. I called the bank. The representative walked me through the activity and then said gently that they'd also flagged a credit inquiry from 3 days ago. Someone had pulled my credit report. Not a bank, not a lender. An individual, through one of the online services that let you access someone's report if you have their social security number and date of birth. Do you recognize that request? She asked. I knew Dylan's email. I knew he had my social security number because we'd briefly talked about co-signing a lease on a bigger apartment 8 months ago. I'd filled out a preliminary form and then quietly decided against moving forward, but I'd never asked whether he'd deleted the information. No, I said. I don't recognize it. I sat at my desk for 3 minutes after I hung up, very calmly, and then I typed a message to Knox that said, Are you available to talk for a few minutes? Something's come up. He appeared in my doorway in less than 90 seconds. I told him, all of it. The transactions, the credit pull, the lease form. He listened without interrupting, standing in the doorway with his arms crossed and his expression getting progressively more still in the way it did when he was containing something. When I finished, he said, Has he done anything else like this? Used your information without asking? I don't know, I said. That's what I'm afraid of. I don't know what I don't know. He looked at me for a moment. Pull your full credit report, he said. All 3 bureaus, tonight, and send me the bank dispute forms when you get them. My attorney can look them over before you file. Knox, I can't keep asking you to. You didn't ask, he said. I'm offering. There's a difference. He paused. Tatum, you're not an inconvenience. What's happening to you matters. I didn't have an answer to that. I'm not sure anyone had ever said it to me quite so plainly before. The full credit report was worse than I'd expected. 2 credit cards I'd never opened. A personal loan for $11,000 that had gone 30 days past due. A second inquiry from 6 months ago, before we'd even discussed the lease. Dylan had been planning this, or something like it, for longer than I'd realized. While I was bringing him coffee in bed on Sunday mornings and defending him to my sister, and telling myself the jealousy was just because he cared so much, I sat on my apartment floor for a long time looking at the numbers on my laptop screen. Not crying, past crying somehow, just looking at the math of how thoroughly I'd trusted the wrong person. Then I got up, I made a list, I pulled every document I had from our 2 years together. Emails, texts, the lease form. I requested the loan applications through the credit bureaus. I began to build something organized and methodical, and airtight out of all the ways Dylan had taken advantage of the fact that I had believed him. When I brought it to Knox's attorney 6 days later, a competent, no-nonsense woman named Margaret who specialized in financial crimes, she flipped through my folder and said, This is exactly what I need. How long did it take you to put this together? About a week, I said. She looked at me over her reading glasses. You have a talent for this. I work in operations, I said. Everything gets documented. The charges she recommended were identity theft and fraudulent use of financial information. She said the evidence was strong, that the paper trail was clear, and that Dylan's primary defense would be that I'd authorized the accounts. A defense she said would fall apart the moment they subpoenaed the IP addresses on the applications, which would trace back to his devices. I drove home that afternoon feeling something I couldn't immediately name. Not happy, not relieved yet. Something more like solid. Like I'd stood on ground that had been shaking for 2 years, and it was finally stable. Knox had started joining me for coffee in the mornings. Not every morning, maybe 2 or 3 times a week. He'd come out of his office with his mug around 8:15 and lean in the doorway of mine, and we'd talk about whatever. The news, something funny one of the analysts had said, a book he was reading, a restaurant I'd mentioned wanting to try. It had started during the weeks when I was gathering evidence, when I'd been arriving early and working through lunch, and he'd noticed I wasn't eating. He'd brought me coffee and stayed to make sure I actually drank it, and somewhere in that the staying had become its own habit. I knew what it meant. I knew what I felt. I had known for a while, in the particular way you know things you've decided not to act on yet, like a door you can see clearly but aren't ready to open. One morning in November, he asked about Becca. She called me last night, I said. She's coming to visit next month. She wants to take me somewhere, she says. A long weekend. Good, Knox said. You should go. She also wants to meet you, I said, and then immediately regretted saying it because it was the kind of thing you said when the line between professional and personal had gotten complicated. She knows you've been, she knows you helped. With everything, she wanted to say thank you. Knox was quiet for a moment. Tell her I'll be here, he said. I looked at him. There was something in the way he said it, not dismissively, not awkwardly. Just steady, like it was a given. Knox, I said, and then didn't know how to finish. He set his mug down on the edge of my desk and looked at me. I know, he said. I'm not ready, I said. I know that. I'm still working through things. I know that too. And there's the question of what it would mean. For work. For Tatum. His voice was even. I'm not asking you to do anything. I'm not going anywhere. He picked up his mug. Take the long weekend with your sister. Take whatever time you need. He paused at the doorway. I'll still be here. I sat at my desk after he went back to his office and looked at the traffic moving 12 floors below my window and thought about what it meant to be seen by someone. Not tracked, not monitored, not checked up on, just seen. Noticed and given room at the same time. I filed the police report the following week. The detective assigned to my case was a methodical, patient man named Ruiz, who went through every document I'd compiled with the kind of attention I'd come to associate with competent people who took their work seriously. He told me it would take time. He told me the evidence was solid. He told me to expect Dylan to claim I authorized everything. I told him I was ready for that. I'd been ready for it since the moment I pulled my credit report and stopped being afraid and started being angry instead. The case moved slowly. Cases like this always do. I went to work. I documented everything. I went to a therapist named Dr. Carroll, who had kind eyes and a direct manner, and who said, in our third session, you're not angry enough at yourself, by the way. People tend to go one of 2 ways. Either they blame themselves for everything, or they understand that someone lying to you doesn't make you naive, it makes them a liar. She paused. You understand that? I'm getting there, I said. That's enough, she said. Becca came in December. She was 12 years older than me, and had always operated on the assumption that her role in my life was to say the things I needed to hear before I was ready to hear them. She arrived on a Friday evening with a carry-on bag and a bottle of wine she'd brought from home, and we sat in my kitchen, and I told her everything, all the things I'd sent in pieces in texts over the past 4 months, but had never said in full out loud. She listened. She didn't interrupt. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Tell me about Knox, she said. Becca, not like that. I mean, tell me who he is. From the beginning. So I did. I told her about 3 years of working across the hall, about the vendor contract he'd quietly dismantled, about the Volvo and the lobby and the 2 words he'd said in the hallway. Come on. And how I'd gone because some part of me had trusted him without ever deciding to. About the coffee. About the way he said I'll still be here like it cost him nothing to mean it. Becca refilled her wine glass and considered. Dylan made you feel like love was something you had to earn every day, she said. And Knox just keeps proving it isn't, without asking for anything in return. He's my boss, I said. I know, it's complicated. I know that too. She looked at me. Are you happy? Right now in your life, are you actually happy? I thought about it honestly. I'm getting there, I said, which was what I'd said to Dr. Carroll. Becca smiled. That's enough, she said. The grand jury handed down an indictment in March. 4 counts, 2 for identity theft, 1 for fraudulent use of financial information, 1 for unauthorized access to a credit report. Dylan was arrested on a Tuesday morning. I found out from Detective Ruiz, who called me at 8:15, which was when Knox and I usually had coffee. Knox was already in my doorway when I hung up. He'd heard enough from my end. He let out a breath. Just one, quiet then. "You did that, we did." "No." His voice was certain. "You built the case. You documented everything. You walked into a police station when it would have been easier not to. You." He paused. "I just paid for a lawyer. Knox, I mean it." I looked at him across the 5 feet of office that had separated us for 3 years. He was in his usual jacket, his usual composed expression, but there was something in his face right now that was different, not trying to look like nothing mattered, just letting it. "I've been thinking," I said. "Tell me about what I said in November. That I wasn't ready." He didn't move, didn't say anything, just waited. "I'm not completely finished," I said carefully, "with all of it. There's the trial still and therapy, and I have another 4 months before my credit is fully cleared. But I feel like myself again, or someone close to who I want to be." I held his gaze. "And I think I've been ready for longer than I've been letting myself admit." Knox walked the 5 feet between us. He didn't touch me. He stopped close enough that I could see the exact expression on his face. Careful and steady, and not at all surprised, like he had learned long ago not to want things too loudly in case they didn't come through. "I need you to be sure," he said. "Not because I'm asking you to be perfect. Because you matter, and I don't want you looking back at this and wondering if it was just proximity. Or gratitude." "It's not gratitude," I said. "I've been trying to talk myself out of it for 3 years because I thought I was supposed to. Because you were my boss and the timing was wrong and there was always some reason to wait." I paused. "But the truth is I notice you, not because you helped me. Because you're you. You're the same in every room. You say what you mean. You don't perform caring. You just do it." I looked at him steadily. That's what I've been watching for 3 years. Something shifted in his expression. Quietly, the way things shifted in him. Not dramatic, just real. "Okay," he said. He raised his hand and tucked a piece of hair back from my face, and the gesture was so careful and so unhurried that I felt it in my chest like a key turning. "Okay," I said. The trial was in June. I sat in the witness box and told the truth. Every detail. In the same organized, methodical way I'd documented everything in a folder 6 months ago. Dylan's attorney tried to suggest I'd authorized the accounts, had consented to the credit pull, had been a willing participant who was now attempting to avoid debt. I answered every question without looking away. The evidence was there. I'd made sure of it. The jury came back in 3 hours. Guilty on all 4 counts. I stood on the courthouse steps afterward in the June heat and called Becca, and then Dr. Carroll, and then Knox in that order. He picked up on the second ring. "It's over," I said. "How do you feel?" he asked. I thought about it. Honestly, the way I'd learned to think about things. "Like it was always going to end this way," I said. "Like I just had to get through it to get here." "Where's here?" I looked out at the street. People moving, taxis, a woman walking a dog so small it was almost theoretical, summer light on the buildings. "Somewhere good," I said. "Come meet me. I want to get lunch somewhere that isn't my desk." I heard the quiet sound of him standing, jacket pulling on. "I'll be there in 10 minutes, he said. We got together on a Thursday in late July, which is not a particularly romantic day or month, but that's how it happened, and I've never needed the circumstances to be cinematic to know when something is real. We were walking back from the restaurant where we'd had dinner, the one I'd mentioned 8 months ago, and then forgotten I'd mentioned, which Knox had apparently remembered. And he said, without preamble, "I've been trying to figure out how to say something for about 6 weeks. Just say it," I said. "I love you," he said. "I've been careful about it because I didn't want to put anything on you while you were going through everything, but I thought you should know." I stopped walking. Knox stopped a half step after. "Knox," I said, "you don't have to. I love you too," I said. "I've been waiting for the right time to say it, and there isn't one, is there? There's just the moment, and whether you say it or you don't." He looked at me for a long moment with that expression. I'd stopped trying to decode and started just receiving, full and still and certain. Then he reached over and took my hand, and we kept walking, and the city was loud and ordinary all around us, and I thought about the woman I'd been a year ago. Sitting on my kitchen floor, shaking after a night in a parking garage, not yet knowing that the thing I was most afraid of was the thing that would eventually lead me exactly where I needed to go. I'd spent 2 years making myself smaller so someone else could feel bigger, shrinking my schedule around his suspicions, apologizing for friendships, explaining myself until explaining felt like the only way to exist. The credit report, the fraud, the trial, all of it was Dylan's choices, and I knew that now in the way Dr. Carroll had meant. Not intellectually, bone deep. What I'd chosen was this man, this Thursday, this ordinary street, clear-eyed and unhurried and completely sure. Becca called me the next morning. She had a sixth sense for timing that I'd stopped trying to explain. "So," she said when I answered. "So," I said. I could hear her smiling through the phone. "Was I right?" "You were right," I said. "You were right from the beginning." "I usually am," she said. "It's a burden I've learned to carry." I laughed, actually laughed. The way I hadn't in so long, it felt like finding a room in my own house I'd forgotten existed. And then we talked, like sisters do, while the morning came through my windows, and the city woke up below me, and everything that had been broken was not yet perfect but was, finally, genuinely, completely, mine.